Greetings to all and welcome to our Q&A session with Jim McCarty. My name is Jonathan Tong and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found on the list of study groups on the L&L research page shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook group and we do meet twice a week on Zoom. We meet on Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time and Saturdays from 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or join our Zoom discussions. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com to get on our mailing list. We send out updates once a week to let you know what we're talking about that week, as well as the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of our Seattle Law of One podcast episodes, as well as recordings of previous Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, as well as Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Trisha Bean from the L&L research channeling team. You can just go to our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button to get notifications when we upload new videos. And again, contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you would like to participate in any of our Q&A sessions. Otherwise, we are blessed once again to be joined by Mr. Jim McCarty for some informal conversation about the Law of One and how to live it in our daily lives. How are you doing today, Jim?
Doing pretty well. I've been doing a lot of ironing this morning.
A lot of ironing?
Yes, I change out my bed this time, the first of the month. And so I have to iron the flat sheet and the pillowcases. And it's kind of a trick with the flat sheet because it's so big. So I have to go into one of the bedrooms and spread it out there and get started and then bring it back in and use the ironing board. So it's been a morning of ironing.
And have you figured out how to fold a fitted sheet properly?
We had a young woman here probably 10 years ago that could make a fitted sheet look like a flat sheet.
Wow.
I've figured out how to get it looking in order, to fold it up just right. It looks good, but it's nothing like a flat sheet.
I know. It is one of those mysteries of third density that I guess we'll just never figure out.
Yes, it's not terribly spiritually oriented, but I guess, it's something you'd have to do in a daily round of activities.
From what I understand, it can be. It could be a meditative practice if one wanted to.
Oh, it's definitely meditative. Yeah.
Nice. Hey, I see Morris has his hand up. Did you want to say something, Morris?
Good morning, Jim. And why the heck do you bother ironing your sheets?
Anna DeAndrea asked me the same thing. That's because I like it to be nice and neat.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be wrinkled. I'll wrinkle it enough just lying on it.
Indeed.
It's just been my process. I'm picky about that.
Detail-oriented can be a very good thing, for sure. Did want to say a special hi to Morris for our viewers who weren't aware of this. Morris is a regular in our sessions, and he is vice president on the board of L&L Research and has been for 40 plus years, and old friend of Jim's and Don's and Carla's way back from the beginning. So always a joy to have him and to sit in with us. I do see a couple questions in the chat window, so I wanted to thank everyone for joining us on Zoom today and wanted to encourage you to put a question in the chat window if you want, and we'll go in the order that we see them. And I do see Renat and Linda and Susan up first. Before we do that, Jim, I did have a question about the timing of changes from density to density. We've been told many times that the timing of Earth's transition from third density to fourth density is tied to the movement of our planetary sphere through space-time and time-space, as if it was on the face of some giant galactic clock. And I was wondering, do you think it would be fair to say that that's pretty much how the timing works for all the changes from densities? From first to second, second to third, fifth to sixth?
I believe so. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I think that basically the creation, which is the creator, moves in a rhythmic fashion. It is nothing really chaotic or unorganized about it. Sometimes we can't see exactly what the organization is, but I think it exists. I think Ra mentioned that there was a clock that they were aware, they knew the clock, And it had a significance for people that wanted to come to this planet from elsewhere, and they could only come at certain times, and but they didn't know when those times were.
Yeah, interesting. I know they have said many times, both Ra and Kuo, I think that, yeah, the change from third density to fourth density is like the ticking of a clock, and you never necessarily know when the hour will be. It's a little bit more general than that, but that transition was tied to the movement of our planet through this giant galactic clock face, for lack of a better word.
Well, that's exactly what Don described it as.
Yeah. I was just wondering, because I don't know if I've heard that visual used for describing the changes for the other densities from first to second and second to third.
Well, one of the problems is first density is that in the beginning there is no time. It's chaos, blowing and burning of wind, earth, wind, and fire and water, and there's nothing happening that can be considered time. It's timeless. So Ross said that the attempt to measure that would be useless, but after a certain point, then time does unroll its scroll of beingness, so that the first density is, I think, 1.5 billion years, and then the second one is the longest at 4 billion. And then we come down to
third
Earth.
density is definitely the shortest of all of them, right?
As Don said, snap a finger in time.
Yeah. Well, it made me wonder about Ra as well, since Ra is trying to graduate from sixth density to seventh density, correct? And do you think that is also tied to movement of their sphere on that
I think so.
Galactic clock face as well?
Well, these sixth density is supposedly 75 million years long, and they only have 2.5 million years to go before they will be available for movement into the seventh density of foreverness.
Do you think that would be, we could think of that as a harvest as well, in terms of entities being harvested from a sixth density to seventh density?
I think so. I mean, the more that we come into unity with the Creator, the more we're giving the Creator a way of knowing itself through all of the choices we make through all of our incarnations in every density. So it's a harvest of our choices that helps the Creator know itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super fascinating to me, because I've thought about some passage. I've seen them say at least once, and it might have been Ra that said it, that sometimes members of a sixth density social memory complex will send members of their collective back as wanderers to third density in order to refine that balance of energies between love and wisdom, in order to take that back to the social memory complex and in effect help them move up to that next level. Does that sound familiar to you? Does that ring a bell? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Oh yeah. That's the role of wanderers. Is to come back here. That's their personal job. But in general, they're helping to lighten the vibrations of the planet. And then they have various talents they can offer in doing that.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I had one other question, if you don't mind, and this has to do with soul streams. My understanding is that each of us have been first and second density entities as part of our soul stream that led us to our current incarnation, meaning we've all been the elements of earth, air, water, and fire. We've all been incarnated who knows how many times as different plants and animals before our first incarnation as humans. But I seem to remember reading somewhere, and I can't find the passages, but I seem to remember them saying something to the effect that when animals die, because they're not inspirited, whatever their essence is just goes into some giant pool of consciousness, and their next incarnation is just pretty much at random, has nothing to do with what happened in their previous animal incarnations. I find that surprising, because I would think that if who we are now as third density entities is one part of a soul stream that goes all the way back to first density, then I don't know, I'm not sure how to make sense out of the idea that when animals die, they just go into some big giant random pool. Am I remembering things correctly, incorrectly?
No,
Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I believe that you stated it just the way that I understand it, although I also don't understand why second density animals cannot find a way to move forward without being invested by an owner like a pet, you know, because as Ross said, pets was the most normal way for second density entities to become third density, as the love that's shared between the pet and the owner is a bond that awakens a spirit complex. So then they're not just a mind-body complex, but a mind-body-spirit complex. So I don't know why, a little rabbit that doesn't have an owner couldn't become eventually a third density being, but it doesn't seem like that's the way it goes.
Maybe it kicks in at some level of third density.
I think it has to because, before before a planet is third density, there has to be some way of there becoming a third density population on it.
Right.
And it would have to come from second density beings. So, but I'm not familiar with anywhere in the raw contact where that is mentioned. Now, I could be wrong. So, and I want to let everybody know, I could be wrong about whatever I'm talking about. This is all my opinion you're going to be hearing.
Well, like most other questions I ask, it's not really that important. It really doesn't have any big bearing on what we're doing in this incarnation, but I'm just a curious person.
I mean, it's something that's important for the evolution of a planet, though, so I don't understand why it couldn't happen. But every time I find a wild animal in my yard that's dead, I take it over to the pet cemetery and I say a little prayer over it, and I ask it to go back into the Creator's beingness and to come back and share its love and light and joy as it was before.
Yeah. And I can only imagine that helps a lot. Well, thanks for answering those first couple questions. I did see a number of folks who have questions in the chat window, so we're just going to go pretty much in the order that they are there. So I see Renat and then Linda and then Susan. Renat, do you want to start first? Do you want to ask your question first?
Sure. Actually, it's a perfect continuation to what Jim said. Hi, Jim. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Renat. How are you doing?
I'm better. I'm feeling balanced after taking care of myself as the war finished. I don't recommend being in a war zone, really. But I was your story about ironing reminded me of my step grandmother who used to iron everything, including underwear. As I would watch her with fascination, but somehow it didn't kick in. I don't even own an iron, so I guess it's not a family thing. My question was about cats, the spiritual aspects of cats, knowing that you're a cat person. And like anything you can think about from your experience or reading or something about the spiritual aspect of cats as they relate to us in third density, in the spirit world, in the metaphysical world. I'm very curious about that.
Well, yeah, I've been a cat person for quite a while. Carla and I had 19 cats together. And then recently, Bosco was a cat that came downstairs after my two favorite cats of all time, Dandelion and Chloe, passed into larger life in 2022. And Carla let me know that had happened in a dream. And I think basically cats, they have, to me, a meditative quality. It seems to me like that they're in touch with things that are going around us that we're not in touch with. And cats can actually be kind of protective. And I'm not sure if that's why the Egyptians valued cats so much, but it could be. And I think the most important thing about the cats is that they are able to be incorporated into our hearts in a way that helps to open our heart and their heart. And so helps us to get them to the third density and helps them to get us more into the purpose of being of service to others, helping a second density being become a third density being. So I think the relationship between a cat, it would be true for a dog, probably a rabbit or a horse, but I haven't had experience with them. I have a lot of experience with cats. So that's just my thought about cats. I think that they're beautiful souls. In general, they're just meditative and inspirational and protective.
Any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I do. Do you have cats who have passed away? Do you have them come back in dreams? And if so, in what capacity? I'm asking this for a specific reason, which is not really relevant. I'm curious about your experience.
Actually, I've never had a dream about a cat that had passed in a larger life. I have had dreams about cats that I owned at the time, but not after they passed away.
Okay, thank you.
Nice.
So thank you, Renat.
Great question, Renat. Love cats. Linda, I saw you had 2 questions in the chat window. Do you want to ask 3? Do you want to ask one for starters, and then we can loop back to you after we go through the rotation?
Most definitely. Hi, Jim. How you doing today?
I'm doing better. How are you doing?
We're doing wonderful over here. It's finally getting warm. Okay, well, first of all, a real quick aside. Some decades ago, Morris was driving in his car and he hit a cat and killed it and grieved over that. I don't know if he ever told you about this, Jim, but he grieved about that. He couldn't understand why that would have occurred. And so he meditated on it, and the thought that came to him during the meditation was the cat had chosen to run out in front of his car, knowing that Morris would bless it and give it some extra love and light to send on his journey. So anyway, that's Morris's take on cats.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I ran over a raccoon once and they killed it, and I thought, what in the world happened? Why did that happen? But I think, things that happened that, well, Ross said there are no mistakes. So
Yeah.
maybe
Same thing
it's,
when he hit the chimpanzee in Malaysia. That was pretty terrible.
yeah.
But anyway, the question I was going to ask regarding current events, I have an issue regarding the Ukraine. I am sickened by the bullying and the lack of free will and the terrible things that are happening to this poor country. Yet I know that as a quote, evolving spirit entity, I should not be triggered by this, and that I should be able to let it go and not feel a reaction, even though I see someone's free will being disrupted massively. What are your views on this? Am I losing polarity by rooting for the little guy?
Well, actually, I think Morris had the best answer to that question I've ever seen this morning in the email he sent to Gary Bean. So, Morris, would you like to recap that email?
We all came here to incarnate to help our planet transition into 4th density. We all were basically standing in line, hoping for a chance to come and bring witness and positive vibe to help the birth of our civilization into 4th density. We knew it was going to be terribly chaotic, and it needed to be chaotic. It needs to be chaotic now because so many people are in that sinkhole of indifference. And it takes this polarizing entity that we're dealing with now that leads the most powerful military and economy in the world. That polarizing entity makes people choose to either be for myself or be for the other guy. And it takes that. We knew that before we came here. We knew it was going to be terribly disruptive, but we came anyway, and our purpose is just to bring as much light and positive vibration as we can. Pray for all these other selves, know that they're dealing with their own struggles, but this is what it takes. This is part of the plan. It's chaotic, but it's also an incredible carnival ride. You get on that scary roller coaster that makes you almost throw up. You get off and you get in line again. Wow, wasn't that fun? That's what we're here, folks.
I just came here for the food. Yeah.
It doesn't answer the question, is this depolarizing people like me negatively who sit there and
Pull for the little guy.
and root for the little guy, so much so that in the very beginning of this, I was ready to go to Ukraine and sit in the basements and make Molotov cocktails.
And that would be depolarizing.
But
You send the love and light to all of the combatants. You can still whoosh for the little guy to come through because you know his cause is more
It's
just. But the little guy and the big guy all chose to be part of this dance. Judas chose to betray Christ. Christ knew Judas was going to betray him. The passion story would have never been the passion story without Judas performing his role. Was Judas evil? He was tormented by it and he killed himself over the decision that he made. But it's all part of this great dance of evolution. It's messy, but it's the biggest show in town.
So answer the question.
I did.
Are us little people who are on the sidelines rooting for them to continue this destruction so that Ukraine can be free? Yeah, is that being negatively depolarized?
Doing Molotov cocktails is negative depolarizing. Praying for both sides that are co-creators with you is positive polarity.
Nice. Yeah, and I would have to only add that there's lots of different ways at looking at everything, and I know that many in the Law of One community have opposing views on this situation and anything else that's related to it. So I definitely agree with everything Morris said, and I think that is a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah.
Jim, did you have anything to add? Any of your own thoughts to add to what Morris said?
When I read Morris's email, I thought there was no better way to say it.
Yeah.
I think the thing that we need to do is our intention is the most important thing. That if we send love and light to anybody, let's send it to everybody. Everybody needs it. If a negative entity doesn't want it, they can reject it. Just intend to do the best you can to be of service to others and to see the Creator and everyone around you. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of what you just said like 10 minutes ago that we've heard so many times, that we came here to lighten Earth energies, and however we can do that. So being that channel for love and light, however we can do that, sounds good to me. Linda, thanks so much for your question, and thanks, Morris, for responding. Did want to note that both Jim and Morris participate in sessions like this with other Law of One study groups too. So feel free to go to the LNL Research website, find a list of study groups there, and find a group that you vibe with, and probably get to see these guys there too. Susan, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I do. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Susan.
Hi. So this week, I had the privilege of working in Springfield, Illinois. I'm a East Coast girl, so I don't get out there much. And so Abe Lincoln, right? He's the best known product of Springfield, Illinois. Have you ever been there?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I guess they have like a gigantic head by his tomb, a statue, and you can rub his nose for luck. I didn't do it. I felt like I should, but I was busy working. So another time. But it got me thinking about how divided our nation was back then and how we had to heal. And we seem to be in another rotation of this need to heal, brother against brother sort of situation. I don't know if there's been any more exploration by LNL regarding this, but I would like, if not, then your own personal thoughts on what lessons did we learn from then that can be pulled forward into our current situation?
Well, I think Abraham Lincoln was one who allowed his body to be taken over by a walk-in,
Right.
which is a little different than a wanderer. The walk-in in this case was a fourth density being, in that it helped to win the war to end slavery. But then after the war was over, Lincoln wanted everybody to unite and to see each other as their equals, that no one was better than anyone else, and that we've all come here to be of service to others, basically is what he said, and that we should see what we could do to help each other to survive the injuries of the war. And I think that that's basically what we need to do now. If there's not actually a war going on here, there's wars going on, as we know, in Ukraine. And I guess the one in Gaza has been called to a temporary halt, hopefully for good. But I think the best we can do is pray for everyone. Pray for the ones that are adversaries, pray for the ones that have been attacked, help them to see the purpose of their reason for being in this incarnation. As Ross said, there really are no mistakes. There are surprises. And if we can look at the world as being a place in which we all have a chance to share our love and light with everybody, then that is the general reason we're all here, to unconditionally love everyone, at least more than half the time. Then we're playing our role. And the stage is on for everyone to walk upon, to play their role, each in our own way, in our homes, in our business, in our schools, in our communities. And if you can radiate that love and light and service to others, those around you, you're doing all you can do. And so I suggest that's what we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Susan. Appreciate that. Jim, if you don't mind, if I could ask a follow-up question on that. Do you think it would be fair to say that part of the point of being in third density, incarnating in third density, is to make what we perceive as ethical choices between what we perceive as service to others and what we perceive as service to self? Meaning that in cases of so many issues that seem so divisive in our country, that at least taking a position on whether you are, well, to go back to the Civil War question that Susan was asking, at some point one had to make a choice whether they were pro-slavery or anti-slavery. Do you think that kind of carries into the issues that we see appearing in our social, political landscape today?
Yes, I do indeed. Before there was the veil of forgetting in third density, you may remember what Ra had to say about those entities. They knew they were the creator. There was no reason to do anything in fear or love to try to move forward on their journey. They knew that they needed to get to the fourth density, but they didn't get there until many, many incarnations. And so the way that they were able to, the way the Logoi said, well, let's see if we can help this journey be a little quicker to be accomplished. And so the veil of forgetting separated the conscious from the subconscious mind. Our subconscious mind, though, still has that knowledge. So that little bit of knowledge, that little seed of knowing we're the creator, can propel us forward on our journeys here to be able to polarize our consciousness one way or the other, positive or negative, so that both paths have a chance to make a harvest into the fourth density. Positively in the fourth density of love and understanding, negatively goes on through the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth, and helps the creator to know itself, just like the positive does. At some point, though, the polarity of the negative entity is brought into question by the negative entity, because they have to see in this extensive balance of love and wisdom that we are all one. They have to love each other, not just themselves. And so they have to switch their polarities. And after that is done, they become positively oriented. And they have helped the creator to know itself in the negative sense, and now they're positive. And that goes on until the middle of the sixth density, where the concept of polarity is no longer used. So the polarity seems to be a way in which the creator has a chance to know itself in many more ways, because there are two polarities. The creator blinks neither at the light nor the dark. Their power is the same as ours, is what Ross said. So I think, though it's traumatic and difficult, that it is the way that we can all help the creator to know itself better. So as the positive entities, we travel that path to the best of our ability, open our hearts as much as we can, let that love of the creator flow out through us. and heal the wounds around us and within us and help the Creator know itself. And we get to move forward into the fourth density, or the wanderers get to go back home.
Indeed. So does that mean, in spite of everyone having made their choices between one path or the other path, or one side of a divisive issue or the other side, that part of the key for all of us to advance to fourth density is learning to harmonize those differences and accepting that we're not necessarily going to agree on these things, but at least find some way to harmonize those differences without violence, preferably?
Yeah, yeah. One thing that is kind of hard to remember is that all of this is an illusion. Everything that seems separate from the Creator is an illusion. There is nothing but the Creator. Everything in your home, everything in the world around you, every person you meet, the weather, the stars, there is all the Creator becoming aware of itself and moving forward into the next octave of creation and starting all over again.
Yeah, and apparently on into infinity. Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much for the clarifications on that. And I'm hoping our viewers have found some love and some wisdom and some guidance and inspiration, perhaps, on how to deal with catalysts that they might be facing regarding current events. I saw Michael had a question next, followed by Elaine, and then Linda, and then Aram. Michael, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Absolutely. Thanks. Hey, hi, Jim. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing, Michael?
Good, really good. I had a question about channeling. I'd seen a podcast with Trish and Gary and everybody, and I was wondering about challenging because they'd mentioned tuning. So I had a question if when during challenging, if you get many failures, and if you do get a failure, how do you deal with that? Is that more of a balancing issue, or do you just send the love and light to a negative friend, or how does that work?
Well, Carla devised the process of challenging any spirit that wishes to challenge or channel through you in order to determine what you had as what an entity was, a positive or negative. So in the challenging process, she suggested that we look at that portion of ourselves that is the most important, that which we would live for and gladly die for if necessary. And for her, it was Jesus Christ. And so that when she would challenge in the name of Jesus, that it was just like having Jesus standing next to her, and that nobody would lie to Jesus. So I think there were a number of times as I'm going through the quote channelings that she would see that there was an entity of a negative nature, and she would simply say, love and light to you, be gone. So in these later days now, I don't have any knowledge of any of our instruments or channels, Gary, Trish, Austin, or I, ever having to deal with negative entities. And part of that might be because here in the living room where I am now and where we have our public channeling meditations, I do the banishing ritual of the lesser pentagram each morning. So that provides a protective nature or shelter, you might say, a light around the room. So that might be why we haven't had any kind of psychic greetings or negative entities attempting to channel through us.
That's
Thank
a great
you.
question, Michael. Any follow-up questions, Michael?
No, that really answered it. Thank you a lot, John.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Indeed. Elaine, you have a question?
Mhm. Hi, Jim. Thanks
Hi.
for being with us today.
Glad to be with you and glad to see you.
Thank you. I sort of have a question about Maldek. I'm wondering what happened to the well, I'll just read it. If planets go through a spiritual evolution, as does our Mother Earth, as in evolving into fourth density, what do you think happened to the spiritual path or evolution of the planet Maldek after it was obliterated? And the reason I ask is because I wonder if those souls who were on Maldek and are now on planet Earth brought some of that Maldek energy, or they contain that Maldek energy with them and have brought it here to planet Earth to evolve, to work with it and polarize through it.
Well, I think that they
Make any
did
sense?
indeed bring that energy with them, because they saw, after they were able to get out of that tangle of fear, which I think took a few million years, they decided that they wanted to try to balance that with learning how to use the energies that they had discovered there that destroyed their planet in a more peaceful way. And I think that could be part of what's happening on the planet here today, that those entities may be in positions of power that would like to eventually balance what they did before. Whether they are able to do that or not is something I think that they've been trying to do for some time, and I hope they are successful. But as to your question about the planet itself, which is now seen to be the asteroid belt between Mars and Venus, I have no idea, because that is the equivalent of our Mother Earth, a consciousness that was blown to pieces. And I don't know exactly how that would affect them. I know that when Don asked Ra about the use of the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that the spirits there, Ra was able to help them to integrate again and to become mind, body, spirits, and not to have them blown apart, because that would be a loss to the creator of part of the creator. So I'm hoping that somehow that the asteroid belt still has a consciousness that could be evolving, but I really don't know. I hope it's not a loss, to the creative part of the creator. It's still a material substance. So I really can't answer that question.
Fascinating question, Elaine. Both of those, really appreciate your asking. Let's see, Linda, you're up again. Did you want to ask a second question?
Yes, please. This is kind of pertaining to the Gary Bean thread that we were working on earlier. Gary Bean was talking about Maldek and Mars and how the planets had been destroyed by the bellicosity on these planets. Since Earth is now a fully fourth density entity, can it still go the path of being destroyed by third density animosity?
Well, that's the same question I couldn't answer about Maldek. I really don't know what that would be. I have no idea. Hopefully we won't have to experience that.
It's a good question.
Maldek, though, was a third density entity when it was destroyed. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, and I was just wondering if a fourth density planet could also be destroyed by third density energies.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I really don't know.
Thank you.
Appreciate your asking that, Linda. I know Quo has said more than a few times in channeling sessions that there are indeed entities who have incarnated from Mars, Maldek, Atlantis, wherever, who are consciously or subconsciously just kind of caught in this repeating loop of love turning into fear, turning into bellicosity, turning into war. And these energies building towards Armageddon was the term they used for it, is certainly something that's still playing out. And I don't know if the technology exists to like literally blow planet Earth to bits, but a nuclear war, I would think, is certainly well within the realm of possibilities for this planet. Is that what you're referring to, Linda, or were you referring to really blowing up literally the whole planet?
No, I've heard that sometimes nuclear missiles and things have been deactivated by unknown sources. I was just wondering, are they these unknown sources, these other beings, going to keep Earth from completely kaputzing itself because of the fact that it's now fourth density? Now, when they were talking about it in third density back in 1980s, then obviously we still could have killed ourselves that way. I just didn't know if we still could do it since it's a fourth density entity that we're dealing with.
And I have a reflection on that, just to briefly add. You're right, back in 1980 or so, there was still a lot of concern about us destroying ourselves. We're here in the 20s. There have been a lot of wanderers incarnating. We hear on the news all of this strife and chaos, but I get the feeling there is a tremendous amount of latent goodness in the planet. That latent goodness is so great in spiritual mass. I can't believe that we could destroy ourselves. Yes, the news, we see the extremes on both sides, but there's a tremendous amount of goodness all around us. You just don't hear that voice.
Well said. Agree 100%. Let's see. I think Aram had a question next, and then Linda. I think that's the end of the questions I'm seeing in the chat window. If we wanted to double back and have you ask a third question, you can certainly do that. Aram, did you have a question you wanted to ask first?
Yeah. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Aram.
Good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
My question is about when I believe at some point Don and Carla kind of switched roles, and I think it was done on a metaphysical level. I'm wondering if that was done with intention or if it was an instance where, Carla didn't realize like how powerful her will was, and she just said something off the cuff and it actually ended up happening. If you could maybe, I don't know, elaborate on that whole situation.
I think what you're talking about is a deleterious energy exchange that Roth referred to in 106. And Don was worried at that time that a lot of things were going wrong, especially Eastern Airlines that he flew for seemed to be failing financially, and there wouldn't be a chance for him to continue supporting our group as he had done for the whole time that I had known him. And I think he was having his own personal problems, and he just didn't know exactly what to do about them. So Carla was, in sync with him, that she knew him very well. And so she just said, well, Don, I see you're having a problem here. Why don't you be like me, small and foolish, and I'll be the strong one. I'll take on these difficulties. Neither one had any idea that since they were one before time and space began, that this would be a possibility, that they could change roles. And so that seems to have been what kind of catapulted Don in a path of doubting himself, fearing the next day. Everyone was worse than the next. And Carla really had, according to Ra, had Don in her own mind or her emotions. And so that she was suffering some difficulties as a result of that. So that was the reason that they were feeling these tragic feelings within each other. And it was apparently a reason why Carla, when she was taking her whirlpool that Ross suggested would help her physical body, that she had a psychotic episode. And that after she was able to get out of the whirlpool and regain her composure and a normal temperature, that it went away. But I think it's also one of the reasons that Don was driven to the point of eventually taking his own life, because he was not able to see the world around him in a balanced fashion that he always had before. He thought that every day was worse than the one before it, and that he just didn't. He did admit himself to our local hospital here at Norton's psychiatric ward, but the doctor there didn't want to talk to Don if Don didn't want to talk to him. They said, "Oh, you ready to talk today?" And Don said, "No." And so I said, "Okay," which I always thought was a weird way to treat a person that you're trying to help. But eventually, Don just behaved as though he had been better, and he was released from the hospital. But on the way home, he said he was no better. Everything was still getting worse and worse. So eventually, he mentioned that he didn't think he would want to go back to the hospital again. I had signed a mental inquest warrant to have him admitted back to see if they could do something to help him. And he didn't want to die in hospital. So he killed himself here outside. And I think he shot himself outside so that Carla wouldn't know where he died and she could live in the house for the rest of her life. So that deleterious energy exchange was something that was totally unusual. I doubt if it has ever been experienced by anybody else in this world or anywhere else. You have to put so many things together, the light of the power, the raw contact that was bringing into the world, attracting our negative entity, fifth density, and that deleterious energy exchange. And that's just kind of the way it worked. And but as you probably know that about 3 days after Don had killed himself, that Carla saw him in a waking vision. And he said that everything had turned out the way it was supposed to. And he said, but you won't understand that till you too go through death's door. And so now she knows.
Beautiful, bittersweet story, if there ever was one. Did you have any follow-ups on that, Aram?
Yeah, I guess my follow-up was, so it seems that Carla's words had immense power. Um, and I'm wondering if, if that's just my assumption, or because I know there was another instance where, she just thought, I'll ask Ross something, and it was like, you know, she wasn't aware of the power of that thought. Um, so I guess I don't really have a question there. I guess I'm thinking out loud. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that her will was what was the most powerful thing about Carla. She didn't care if there's negative entities trying to attack or psychically greet her. She was here to serve the Creator. And so she would do that no matter what, might happen. And that point where she was at a public channeling meditation on a Sunday night and was asked a question that she didn't know the answer to, and she wished she knew Ra and what they would say. That was enough of her will that she began to leave her body. And fortunately, those of Latui were able to continue channeling through her and to keep her in her body. And so her will was what was powerful. And
Indeed. It sounds like a key part of this was the metaphysical connection that Carla had with Don as well.
Yeah, as one since before time. That was exactly the way Ra put it.
Right. It sounds like that gave those words a little bit extra meaning or power.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question from Linda. Did you have one more question you wanted to ask?
Does anybody else have anything? We're unmuted. Does anybody else have anything that they would prefer to add? So raise your hand, and if not, I'll throw in my question. Okay, Maura says go for it. Okay, my question is, I know that a lot of these people that are in this group are really getting into calling down orbs and entities from outer space.
Good question.
The Steven Gear thing and all these other things that are going on. Has the quarantine been lifted so that the lights or entities that they're calling down and claiming to see, has the quarantine been lifted enough so that positive, polarized places can visit now, or are we just seeing a bunch of negatively things being drawn in?
I don't believe there's been any change in the quarantine. No channelings that I'm aware of have ever mentioned that. I think the veil of forgetting might be getting thinner for some people so that they can see things that other people can't. I've heard of some of these orbs that you're talking about over the last few years. And I've never seen one myself, but I've talked to people who have. So it just might be that only those who have eyes to see would see them. Back during the raw contact, where I mentioned that UFOs were the positively oriented ones had the role of getting a person who saw them to say to themselves, "What is that? Is there intelligent life beyond ours? Is there something that I could know about that?" And that could be the beginning of a spiritual journey. So I don't know if the orbs and things are playing that role, but I know that Ross said that UFOs back then did have that role of awakening a spiritual seeker to their path.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did want to say, for the record, to my knowledge, no, the Seattle group has not had any conversations about calling down UFOs or anything like that. That's definitely not something I'm interested in. I don't believe we've talked about that in our Zoom sessions. But as said, Morris and Linda do sit in with other Law of One study groups too, and entirely possible that other groups are doing that. Otherwise, I don't see any other questions in the chat window, and it looks like we have just about enough time for a pop quiz. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and commence. Pop quizzes, of course, are something we like to do just to kind of end our otherwise serious discussions on a fun note and maybe look for some Law of One connections to pop culture. So today, Jim, I am going to quiz you on one of the greatest third density entities to come out of your hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. This person is generally considered to be the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time, as well as one of the greatest athletes of all time, and one of the greatest all-around people of all time, at least according to what he said in his own opinion. I am, of course, referring to who, Jim?
Muhammad Ali.
Yes, indeed, also known as the greatest. Yeah, for folks who weren't old enough to see this guy in action while he was alive, just a really, really special human being. So special that I believe they named the airport in Louisville after him.
Muhammad Ali International Airport.
Yeah. And I'm sure you knew that Muhammad Ali was from Louisville, but I'm guessing that most of our viewers did not do that. Can you talk a little bit about this person? Like, what do you know about him? What do you think made him special or different?
Oh, there were so many things that made him special. When he was 12 years old, he had a bicycle that somebody stole. And that was the reason he got into boxing, because he was going to beat the dickens out of whoever that was if he found him. So that's how the boxing career started. And he eventually won the gold medal, I believe it's the 1960 Olympics. And it is said, and I don't know if it's true or not.
Wait, I'm going to stop you there because I'm about to ask a question about that for the pop quiz. Hold on to that thought.
Jump a step or two forward.
Okay. I have a feeling like you're going to do very well on the pop quiz today. This is going to be mainly for folks who don't know that much about this gentleman. How about from a Law of One perspective? How do you see this entity from a Law of One perspective?
Eventually, they don't know exactly what caused it, but I believe he had Parkinson's disease that made it difficult for him to speak. Yeah. But it also made him a very inspiring soul. He would go to places around the world to help people that needed help. Yeah. And I think if you heard anything from Billy Crystal's eulogy that he gave about it, that was a beautiful eulogy. I've never heard a better one in my life. He was helping Billy Crystal in the Middle East, where they're Jewish and Palestinians and Arabs were meeting together, and they needed some help from the most famous Islamic person in the world, because he changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali, because he didn't want to be associated with what the old Cassius Clay had suffered in the way of racism and looking at things in a difficult way. So he just helped that group to work together where their countries were at war. And here was the most famous Islamic person in the world helping all three of them.
Yeah.
And so he did that throughout the rest of his life.
Yeah.
He dedicated himself to service to others. And
Which is really fascinating, since you could say in some ways, huge ego, really strong ego, and extremely self-centered, but
yeah.
not in a selfish way. It's not like he was selfish and not considerate of others. For sure, he thought a lot about helping people less
Oh,
fortunate.
yeah.
I think
Well,
just
actually,
self-centered in the sense he had a very strong sense of who he was and what
oh,
he.
yeah. Well, I think part of it was his great sense of humor, too. He liked to play with Howard Cosell a lot
Yeah.
about how Howard was calling the boxing matches and one thing and another. And they
Yeah.
eventually became really good friends.
Yeah.
But I think that I was so impressed about an article I read about him that I incorporated it into part of a chapter in Living Law 103, The
Hmm.
Outer Work. And I was just amazed by what he did and what his life was like. So,
Beautiful soul, just so radiant, so charismatic, so powerful, and all the best ways for sure. And yeah, I would encourage your viewers. Billy Crystal is a well-known comedian and comic actor who apparently made friends with Ali early in both their careers, and he was asked to give a eulogy at Ali's memorial. And if you look for it on YouTube, it's beautiful.
I think that Billy Crystal first met Muhammad Ali when Muhammad Ali was at a gathering of people that were, I'm not sure what the gathering was, but they wanted to have a comedian come up on the stage, just kind of lighten the atmosphere a bit.
Right.
So Billy Crystal did a imitation of both Muhammad Ali and Howard Cosell.
Right.
And it so broke up Muhammad Ali that afterwards, he didn't even know who Billy Crystal was. He came
Yeah.
over to him and
He was unknown at that time. Nobody
Yeah,
knew who he was.
he said, "Little brother, you
Yeah.
are one of the funniest people I ever met. We're going to get along great."
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful story of friendship and peace and all that good stuff. And I really don't know that much about this entity, so I'm going to probably sound like an idiot as I'm going over this quiz, since there's so much that I don't know. But for the sake of our viewers who maybe know even less than me, this one you might not know, Jim, but his birth name, Cassius Marcellus Clay, came from a man who was what? Was it A, a farmer, B, a Baptist preacher, or C, an abolitionist?
I really don't know. I'll just go with B.
Correct answer is, in fact, A and C. Yeah. And again, I only learned this about a day ago in researching
Okay.
this quiz. Apparently, Cassius Marcellus Clay was a 19th century farmer and anti-slavery crusader who emancipated the 40 slaves that he inherited from his father.
All right.
He edited an anti-slavery newspaper, commanded troops in the Mexican-American War, and served as a minister to Russia under Abraham Lincoln. And since he was going against Southern conventions at that time, he faced more than a few death threats. He was beaten, stabbed, and shot by political opponents, but somehow managed to live to the age of 92.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
I
that's
had no idea.
great to know. I'm glad to know that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and his changing his name to Muhammad Ali and adopting Islam. I remember he caught a lot of flack for that at the time.
Yeah.
Are you ready for your second question?
Oh, I guess so. Who knows?
Let's see. This one, I believe you know the answer to. What did Ali do with the gold medal that he won in the 1960 Olympics? Was it A, gave it to his mother, B, sold it and gave the money to charity, or C, threw it in the river?
He threw it in the Ohio River.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell us about that? What did you hear about that? What do you know about that?
Well, from what I understand, when he got back from the Olympics, he went into a restaurant and they refused to serve him. And he could see that nothing had changed. It didn't matter what he did, he was still going to be treated as a lower person. Racism was still abounding. And so he said, well, this is a symbol of racism, and I'm going to get rid of it. And so he did.
Indeed. That's how he described it in his autobiography. Apparently, there are other people who are questioning that account, saying that he lost it. I find it hard to believe he would just lose an Olympic gold medal, whereas the story he told seems quite possible. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't think he would lose something that he'd worked so hard for.
You would think not. No. But yes, and we are still fighting those same battles of racism as well as sexism and heterosexism in this country, in this world, till we figure out that all is one. How about your last question?
Okay.
You probably know this one, but some of our younger viewers might not.
He refused to go to the Vietnam War.
Yeah. Indeed. In case our viewers didn't know, he was banned from boxing for 3 years, not because he refused to change his name back to Cassius Clay, but because he refused to serve in the military, and not because he refused to pay taxes.
Yeah, he said, I haven't got anything against those Vietnamese. They never did nothing to me.
Right. And that was a really courageous stand to take for our viewers under the age of, I don't know when, but there was such a thing as the draft in this country where everyone who turned 18, their name or their birth number was thrown into a lottery machine, and once a week they would pull out numbers, and if your number was drawn, you were drafted to serve in the military to fight the war in Vietnam.
My number is 161. I remember that from those days. Yeah, it was really intense time. And I don't think anyone who wasn't alive at that time can quite fully appreciate how it felt to be drafted against your will, to have to go fight in a war that you didn't believe in and kill people who you had nothing against, all to serve not necessarily noble purposes. Lessons that I'm sure we are still working with today. Yeah. Well, Jim, really wanted to thank you for joining us again today and sharing your thoughts and your wisdom and experiences. Any last thoughts, reflections you want to share with our viewers before we say goodbye? Well, I just want to thank everybody for your questions. I can feel your hearts opening and letting the Creator's love flow through with the questions. And hopefully that the step forward we can take together by considering these questions together would be a way that we all can help each other on our spiritual journeys. I think that's what we're all here for. And I thank you, Jonathan, for holding these Zoom casts on a monthly basis. And I know you have other places that you do the same, because it gives people a chance to come together and to just see that we are all one, and that there are solutions to the problems in the world around us by remembering we're all one. And so thank you all. And I love you all. May the rest of your day go well.
Love you too, my friend. Thank you for always making time to be here with us and helping us all learn together on the way home. Thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. For everyone who joined us on the Zoom call today and brought your beautiful vibrations and your beautiful questions, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. And to who all who are watching us on video in the near future or in the distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We're sending you our love light, and we're receiving yours. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite Creator. Adonai. Namaste.